All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Torah Studies, where, wait for it, study Torah. I know what you're thinking. Who would do such a thing with Torah studies? The answer is us. Okay, so I want to dedicate this class in loving memory of an individual who's very impactful in the Chabad world for many years, Rabbi Moshe Kotlarsky, and I am trying to remember his Hebrew name, which I don't remember his name, like the Hebrew and his father's Hebrew name. He passed away today. Rabbi Moshe Kotlarsky worked at Chabad headquarters, headed up a lot of the projects, worked with a lot of philanthropists in really advancing Chabad worldwide. So a lot of the European Chabad houses, he helped facilitate and get off the ground, getting the donors, finding the right people, and locking them in. This was, of course, after the Rebbe passed away in 1994. So for the last 3 decades, very instrumental in the growth of Chabad. Also spearheading the Chabad on campus locations and really building them out and making sure that they're funded. Every Chabad, I can't say every because I don't have first-hand information, but my understanding is, my belief is that every Chabad on campus, at least in the US, was funded initially for, I think, 2 years of like seed funding. Plus the buildings, I think the down payment was paid for by, not this rabbi, but he got the funding together. He put it all together. So a real giant in the Chabad world in the sense of leadership, not necessarily rabbinic leadership, but just a, strategic leadership and someone that really cared about shluchim worldwide and would visit nonstop, and someone who I knew pretty well. And it's a great loss. He passed away. How old was he?
74.
74.
Yes.
He was suffering the last 2 or 3 years, cancer. And he was fighting, and he passed away today. So his memory, his life and his legacy is phenomenal, and his memory lives on in what he helped create within Chabad and the Jewish community worldwide. So the class is dedicated to Rabbi Kotlarsky. Oh, I should also mention he was very instrumental in JLI and Torah and all of these the adult education wing of Chabad, very instrumental in, again, getting it off the ground and making sure that it's funded and that sort of thing. Here we go. My mom just posted his name, Rabbi Moshe Yehuda ben Tzvi Yosef Kotlarsky. Okay, so let's begin with.
I just wanted to say that my parents knew, or Bubby knew his mother, Goldie Schimmelman. She went to school with her.
Wow.
And I knew his parents. I knew the whole family. Very, very special people.
Very special guy. Very special guy. Great speaker, funny guy. I mean, yeah.
Married to one of the Kazan girls.
Nice. Larger than life character. All right, so let's begin with the class. Today's topic is, so we have a little bit of a departure today. So typically the class is on the parsha, hence the name Torah Studies. However, today we get holiday themed. We do this a few times a year around the holidays. So today the theme is Shavuot or Shavuos, depending on your pronunciation. And that's the holiday in which we commemorate the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai. So what we're going to do today is talk about Torah. What a wonderful topic to talk about in anticipation of Shavuot. The holiday begins a week from tonight. It's a 2-day holiday. So it's not like a 7 or 8 day holiday, 2-day holiday. So it goes Tuesday night into Wednesday, and then Wednesday night into Thursday. Thursday night, the holiday is over. This year, so the Torah was given the year 2448 of the Jewish count of the Jewish years. This year's 5784. So we're talking about 3,336 years ago. The anniversary of the giving of the Torah at Sinai, Shavuot, Tuesday night. Okay. So what we're going to talk about today specifically is the mitzvah of writing a Torah scroll, which, as we'll see, is one of the 613 mitzvot. In fact, Sandrine, look who's here. Oh, this is it. The gang is back. So one of the 613 commandments is to write a Torah scroll. In fact, it's the 613th of the 613. The very last mitzvah of the Torah is to write a copy. Now, we're going to read these texts inside, but I just want you to know, and the connection to the theme of Shavuot is, of course, Torah at Mount Sinai, writing a Torah scroll. When we write a Torah scroll, it's like we got another one, or we got the Torah once again at Sinai. So that is a theme to focus on today. Let's start with the foundation of this mitzvah in the Bible, Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 19. Tov, I'm going to ask you to read it. Give me 1 second. Let me pull this up here on the screen. Stay with me. Hold on. Okay, here we go. 1 week, 1 day, I'll be ready. I'll be ready to go as soon as we're ready to go. Okay, Toba, please take it away. Text
And
1.
now write this song for yourselves and teach it to the children of Israel. Place it in their mouths so that this song will be my witness for the children of Israel.
Here is what God tells the Jewish people. Write the song for yourselves. I think God is telling Moses, but it becomes a mitzvah for all of us. Write this song and teach it to the children of Israel. What's this song? So technically the song refers to the Torah portion of Ha'azinu, which is the Torah portion of text 1a. Deuteronomy 31 is the Torah portion of Ha'azinu. Ha'azinu is written as a song. If you look at it in the Torah, it's written in 2 columns. There's usually like a solid column of text. So this is actually 2 smaller columns side by side with a small gutter in between. So it's written kind of like in a poetic form. So God says, write this song, but we have another prohibition about only writing a part of the Torah on a scroll. So if you're writing this on a scroll, well, guess what? You got to write the whole scroll, right? Because that's how we scroll. So text 1b is where Maimonides talks about this mitzvah of writing a Torah scroll. Text 1b, Toba, please take it away.
It is a positive commandment for every Jewish man to write a Torah scroll for personal use. The passage states, and now write this song for yourselves. This does not refer only to the song, but to the entire Torah, which includes this song. This is inferred from the law that a Torah may not be written in sections. In other words,
you can't just write a Torah scroll, one part of a Torah scroll. It's either all or nothing, like a good matching campaign, right? This is all or nothing. Like you got to get the whole thing in, or else don't even bother. And that's the way it works. So what's the point of this? The point is, this is how we know that there's a mitzvah for everybody to write a Torah scroll, right? Because of
question.
Yes, David.
What about writing a Shema for a mezuzah?
Or for tefillin, for that matter. Excellent question. So I think what it means is that if you're writing a scroll to read and to study from, so mezuzah is a separate mitzvah. But if you're writing a scroll to be read, let's say in synagogue or whatever, then it's got to be the whole, hey, Faye, good to see you, welcome. Then it's got to be the whole scroll. It's got to be the whole scroll or no scroll at all. That's the deal. That's a good question. I think when it comes to mezuzah, you have a specific commandment. Now you might say, well, maybe this is a specific commandment to write Hazinu, to write this Torah portion, and that's it. It's a good question. I guess there's other mitigating factors. I'm assuming because if it's in the context of utilizing for study, it's got to have the whole thing. But yesh la'ayin b'chol zeh, which is Hebrew for saying, it requires a little bit further thing. But certainly Maimonides clearly says, Mishnah Torah, Rambam clearly says, from here we have a mitzvah to write a Torah scroll. And it says, not just to write a Torah scroll, to have in the shul. Everybody should write a Torah scroll. Kol ish v'ish. Every single one should write a Torah scroll. I feel bad asking this question. But when was the last time any of us wrote a Torah scroll? My hand is way down. I have not written a Torah scroll. Most of us are not scribes. So now we need to get into what it entails to write a Torah scroll and what that looks like. So Adrian, if you don't mind, please read. And by the way, I want to tell you this. We're going to hit a lot of text today in this class, probably about 20 different sources. We're going to put it all together. If you've been here before, you know that by the end, it all makes sense. So stick with me. Even if you're wondering what each text has, we're layering the text, and then it's going to all come together. All right. Adrian, once again, please read text 2a. This is also from Maimonides, Mishnah Torah, his code of Jewish law.
Even if your ancestors left you a Torah scroll, it is a mitzvah to write one yourself. If you write the scroll by hand, it is considered as if you received it on Mount Sinai. If you don't know how to write Torah, commission others to write it for you. One who prepares even one letter of a Torah scroll is considered to have written the entire scroll.
So isn't this interesting? There's a lot of laws here, a lot of details. Let's go one at a time. Number one, even if you got a scroll, write a scroll. Why? What do you think? You can say, what? Hold on. If the mitzvah is to have a scroll, I got a scroll. I got it from my parents. Why do you need to write your own scroll? What do you think?
Have an ownership stake in it?
Ownership stake. I don't know if there's a right answer, by the way. I'm just just to discuss it. Right? Have an ownership that you should own it. What else? I think along those lines, another detail. I think it's probably the same thing. But like,
they say it's like being on Mount Sinai.
oh, so that you can re-experience it. It's not enough that your parents are at Mount Sinai. You be at Mount Sinai, right? Your Torah, your Sinai. That's a good bumper sticker. I think also along the lines of what Mike said is that let me think of how would I articulate it. When you get a scroll from someone else, even like a parent, grandparent, it might not have the same. Yeah, I think it's like, yeah, that ownership. It's just not the same as your own scroll, right? It's like, it's like an old scroll. Be a new scroll. Like I want my own. Okay, then there's the idea that if you write it by hand, it's like you receive that at Mount Sinai. That's obviously the connection, as I said, between this topic and Shavuot, the celebration of the giving of the Torah at Sinai, etc. If you don't know how to write a Torah, commission others to write it for you. Again, so not everyone is a scribe. So what are you gonna do? How are you gonna do the mitzvah? So you hire someone, pay someone to write your Torah scroll for you. And then it says, if you prepare one letter, and this kind of sounds like, so then am I writing it or repairing a letter? Even one letter is like you've written the entire scroll. Okay, now.
Rabbi,
Yes.
if you pay to purchase letters in a Torah scroll, is that like writing a letter in a Torah scroll, or does that not count?
Yes, because we just read, so that's who's asking this? Susan? Is that you?
Yeah, it's me.
Hey, Susan.
Hi.
Okay, so based on what we just read that Rambam wrote, he says like this: if you don't know how to write a Torah scroll, commission someone to write it for you, so that would work. But what about the fact that it's only one letter? We just said if you repair even one letter, it's like you wrote the whole thing. So you put those two details together, commission someone to write one letter in the Torah for you, boom, you've got it. Now, at the end of the class, there is do you have the QR code in the back? No. All right. Well, there is a QR code in my book somewhere. You guys don't have it. No, I didn't pick it out. All right, whatever. Anyway, there is a Torah scroll that you can buy into, I think for like $1. You pay $1 and you get a letter to the Torah, and it's like you did the mitzvah and the whole deal. The truth is, today's class, we're going to move, well, not away from this, but we're going to move, I think, in a bit of a different direction about not just writing a Torah scroll, but also, as we'll see, doing some other things. But we'll get there in a second. But let's take a look at text 2b, because this is an interesting twist.
Could
Text
I just
2b.
add one thing?
Yeah.
Also, there's been psychological studies that anybody who actually writes something, it imprints it more in his memory, in his or her memory, than somebody who just hears something.
Right. Good. Right. Write it down, take notes,
Right.
and it ingrains it. Yeah.
I mean, it's been proven.
Yeah. That's good. Text 2b. Adrian, if we can stick with you on this, please take it away.
Rabbi Yeshua, the son of Alba, taught in the name of Rabbi Gadal, who taught in the name of Rav. Purchasing a completed Torah scroll from the market is like snatching a mitzvah from a market stall. To write a Torah scroll is equivalent to receiving it on Mount Sinai.
Look at this. You guys see the difference here in 2b? What are the two options? You purchase a completed scroll, or you commission a scroll, or you write a scroll. What's the difference? He says, if you purchase it off the shelf, purchasing a mitzvah off the shelf. It's not like, it's like buying a suit off the shelf. Who does that? Right. But, right, conception. However, if you commission If you write a Torah scroll or you commission someone to write it, then it's like you got a Mount Sinai. In other words, and this is coming from the Talmud, Tractate Menachot, the Talmud is teaching us that although you can fulfill the mitzvah of writing a Torah scroll by buying one that somebody wrote without you in mind, it's like a prefab situation. Best way is to do it from scratch. Either you write it or have someone else write it. Yeah. Okay. I'm not making this. This is the Talmud.
So a lot of people, purchase Torah, donate it to the
Correct.
synagogue or whatever. So that's the same thing as subscribing someone to commission someone.
That would be commissioning some, unless you pay for somebody, a scribe already wrote a Torah. It's sitting in, torahsrus.com. And you purchase the Torah and then you donate it to the shul. By the way, this is a little bit different. This mitzvah is not really about synagogue use. This mitzvah, the initial mitzvah, everyone should have their own Torah. Like, have a Torah scroll. So that it's a little bit of and we're going to talk about the iterations, the evolution of this mitzvah and how it plays out. But the idea of I'll buy a Torah or commission Torah or be part of a Torah that then sits in the synagogue for communal use, that's very important. I'm not discounting that. That's not necessarily the initial meaning of this mitzvah. It seems like the initial reason for this mitzvah is to study, that one should have something to study from. Now, text 2c, Adrian, one more text 2c, Rashi.
He performs a mitzvah, however, writing the Torah scroll is a much greater mitzvah.
So you could buy one that's already written, which is a mitzvah, but writing one from scratch, in other words, writing one with that intention, that kind of custom commission or custom writing, that's the greater mitzvah. Now, all of this leads to the question I wrote in the email I sent out a few hours ago. All this leads to the burning question, not the burning bush, that's a different story, but this leads to the burning question as follows, and that is, well, why aren't we doing this? Yeah, sure, synagogues make, the Torahs are donated, so families sometimes donate. You can buy a letter in the Torah, as we spoke about, but if the spirit of this mitzvah is that you should write it, which I just said it, but like if the spirit of the mitzvah is that everyone should have a Torah scroll, write a Torah scroll. For who? For you, for the house, for the family. We said even if you get it from your parents, write your own. In other words, it's an individual thing. It's not like the shul should have one. Sorry, the shul should have one and more than one. But I should also have one. So how come no one has one? Oh, that's a technical question. That's a good. Faye's, just because I don't think anyone heard that on the thing. So Faye asked, where would we put it? Who has an ark in their house? Okay, that's a technicality. It could be that when you when you buy a house from a Jew with a Jewish real estate agent, they'll make sure that a house with an ark. Maybe that should be a thing. I'm kind of kidding, but like that's maybe no. But you're right. So it's a technical challenge. But if it's important, so we'll figure it out. Just like many kosher homes have two dishwasher, or, I don't know, whatever, two sinks instead of one sink. All right, maybe you have to figure it out. Maybe it's just something. Maybe you need to retrofit the house. Who needs a sunroom? We now have an ark room.
Is this different than, I guess, the requirement for like a Jewish king to write their own scroll?
Yes, but good point. I want to reference that also. I wasn't going to, but now I want to. So Mike is pointing out there is a mitzvah. A Jewish king has very specific laws. Number one, can't have too many wives, can't have too much money, can't have too many horses. Okay? And has to have a Torah at all times. One or two, at least one. At least one, I think. At all times. And the reason is to keep it in check. So this is an addition. Doesn't it have to be on his, wrapped up in his, against his chest?
Yeah,
he has to be with him at all times. And the spirit of this mitzvah is, the spirit is really that there should be the sense of transparency, but more than that, a sense of obligation to a higher calling, a sense of that even though he's the king, he's not above the law. In fact, he's going to hold the book of law with him at all times. It's like the ultimate declaration. Who is the most likely person to break the law, to violate the law? The person that thinks he's above the law. So comes along Torah and says, the king, you know what one of the hallmark mitzvahs of a king is you got to hold the law books, that we're holding you accountable first and foremost. All right, so that's that. But in addition to that, it seems that mitzvah 613, the way Rambam, you know what? The truth is, it's clear in Rambam. It's a mitzvah on every single person to have a Torah scroll, and then do what with it? Everyone should mitzvah to have your own scroll, and then what? Put it somewhere else? No, to have it in your house. In other words, it's so foreign. That's my question. Why don't we do this? But my meta point is, it's so foreign to us, we can't even fathom that that's even a mitzvah. That's how much we don't do it. It's like, who would have a Torah scroll in their house? Like, what are we, a synagogue? 1 second, time out. The original mitzvah is that every one of us should have a Torah scroll. Have your own Torah scroll. You sometimes buy for the kids. You ever see those ones for the kids? I don't want to do it with my hands. But you know those Torah scrolls? Those little Torah scrolls, it's like written on paper, huh? There's the plush one. No, but I'm talking about the ones that are a little bit more advanced, not the stuffed Torahs. The ones that have like the wooden poles, and it's printed on paper, so it's not kosher, but it's got pretty much everything. It's got a little mantle, right?
I've seen one of these.
Yeah. Pull it off. Usually, it's like the CD of Torahs. You know what I'm talking about. Who invented the CD? Right? A sadist. Someone who was like, oh, let's see you spend $25 on Barney. Yes, I'm dating myself. Right? And then it'll go into the car. And 2 weeks later, it's scratched beyond recognition. Sorry, that was DVDs. Doesn't matter. Same thing. Right? It's like, great, let's put out a medium that is so inherently fragile to the point of no return. The kid grabs it with like sticky fingers, because what else? Right? And then, oh, our high-tech laser can't read that anymore. No kidding. Anyway, back to my point. My point is that that those Torahs were made by the same people, because the kid opens it up once and it rips. And then you have now 2 Torahs, and then it's a whole thing. The point of this is that it seems like the original mitzvah is that every one of us should have a Torah, to the point. So my question is, so then why don't we do this? Why did this fall out of practice? Since when have you heard of a mitzvah that's like a biblical mitzvah, and it's like, yeah, we just don't do it. It's like, oh, you know that whole thing about meat and milk?
So do you know anybody that has their own individual?
No one has it. No one does this mitzvah. My grandfather used to have in his house at any given time 4 or 5 Torah scrolls. He had an ark built into his house, not like an ark like a magnet, but like an ark, like a cabinet for the Torahs, because he was a sofer. He literally repaired Torahs. That's what he did. But I've never seen anyone. I've never walked in someone's house and said, "Oh, have you seen my Torah?" I've never seen. Someone says that. I don't know. That's going to be a little bizarre. Someone's like, "Oh, here's my Torah scroll. Would you like to learn Torah from my scroll?" That no one does that. And my question is simple: how did this mitzvah fall out of practice? Why did it fall out of practice? How is it allowed to fall out of practice? What does it even mean that it fell out of practice? Because the mitzvah is not only that a synagogue should have a Torah, but that you and I should have a Torah. So, show me the Torahs. Yeah.
Did they have one back before the synagogues began? I mean, people had just created their own individual.
Interesting. So Faye is asking, maybe once synagogues became a thing, maybe that's when the home version went away. It's like the evolution of Wheel of Fortune. Initially, everyone had Wheel of Fortune at home. And then at some point, when Pat Sajak and Vanna, when they got involved, then no longer do we need to play it at home. I'm kidding. That is not at all the evolution. But everyone's wondering, what are you talking about? In this alternative universe that I just created. But yes, it's a theory. There's actually it's an interesting theory, but there's another angle on this. David, jump in.
Maybe it's because, obviously it's a fine art to writing a Torah scroll and writing it in the right way. And maybe it just became a lost art.
Yeah, so on a technical level, you could say that maybe, it fell out of practice because how practical is it? How do you write a Torah scroll? Who knows how to write a Torah scroll? And how can everybody have a Torah scroll? So that's a technical problem. But you can, I don't know, I guess it can be solved by either more people learning how to write Torah scrolls, which would be good. I mean, the more Torahs, the better. Or by commissioning someone. It's not an impossible thing to overcome. You're right, there is a challenge. It's not impossible to overcome. I don't know that from the origins, from the beginning, that it was any more practical and it became harder throughout the years, but maybe it did. But that, I mean, it's a good angle. What we're going to do though is look at really the history of how this all evolved, and the way we're going to do this is by quickly dabbling into the difference between the written Torah and the oral Torah. This will become very important, right? So these terms, I'm sure you've heard these terms before. I'm just going to very quickly clarify what they are. Written Torah refers to the 5 books of Moses, as well as the other 19 books of scripture, of the Jewish scripture, 24 in total. And these are the 5 books of Moses, plus the books of the prophets, like Joshua, Judges, Kings, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Isaiah, etc. And then you have Torah, and then Ksub. And then you have the writings or the scripture, which the book of Psalms, the book of Ruth, the book of Ecclesiastes and Proverbs, etc. So you have 3 categories, 24 books in total. That's the written Torah. Then you have the oral Torah. The oral Torah is the Mishnah, the Talmud, the codes of Jewish law, and all of the commentaries. All of that is the oral law. And there are way more books than the 24 that we mentioned. Tens and tens and tens of thousands. I don't know why I'm underselling it. Hundreds, I'm sure, hundreds of thousands of different volumes published. Now, this may shock you. Text 3a will knock your socks off. Take a look at text 3a. So, Faye, you're going to read this, please. This is from the Talmud, Tractate Gittin.
Teachings that are transcribed may not be recited from memory. Teachings that are transmitted orally may not be transcribed.
So here we go. The Talmud says, which is basically the Jewish law says, that the written Torah cannot be recited from memory. So if it's written Torah, then it's gotta be written. So when you're reading a verse, read it. In fact, there are those that say, and I haven't heard that whenever the Rebbe was speaking of Habraim and quote a verse from Torah, it would always be slightly modified. Because you're not actually supposed to quote a verse from Torah, the written Torah, verbatim without reading it. You hear what I'm saying? You find this oftentimes, okay, I feel like, did that make sense what I just said? Yes, sort of. You find this sometimes when somebody reads the Torah, like a bar mitzvah boy, and they know it by heart, and then they're reading it without looking at the words. It's not kosher. Like, you have to read it. If it's the written Torah, you have to read it from the written word. That's the first sentence. Teachings that are transmitted may not be recited from memory. That's point 1. What's point 2? That's the relevant point today. Teachings that are transmitted orally may not be transcribed. I don't know why it's written so weird. The oral Torah, you can't write down the oral Torah. And I know what you're thinking. What about the Mishnah? What about the Talmud? The answer is something changed, and that is at the core of the conversation about why we don't write Torah scrolls for the house today. So stay with me. I said we're going to put up a bunch of things together. It's all going to make sense, but stay on the train with me. Here's the deal. The oral Torah was initially not allowed to be written down, which means it's called oral for a reason. It's oral teachings, oral Torah, which means that they were meant to be explanations, expositions, background information about the Torah, about Jewish law, but was meant to be from parent to child, right? Moms and dads to sons and daughters, teachers to students, rabbis to congregants. It was meant to be passed down in an oral, verbal tradition. But there came a time, and this happened in about the 2nd century of the Common Era, around the 200s. There came a time when the entire oral Torah stood in a precarious position. What was the problem? The problem was this was shortly after the destruction of the Second Temple. Moreover, this was at the time when the Jewish community was no longer concentrated in a single locale, but was rather diversified. And there was further diversification happening where Jewish communities, right, were spreading around the world. We call this the diaspora condition. So the diaspora was happening, Jews spreading out across the globe without a concentrated or a single space for Torah to proliferate. The problem is that you can end up with multiple traditions, right? And really break this thing called Judaism. And so Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, the great rabbi and leader at the time, the spiritual leader at the time, said, now is the time. You ready? I'm about to say something very harsh. Now is the time to break that law. It's shocking, but there's a verse that says there will come a time, another verse from elsewhere that says there will come a time when this mandate, when this prohibition of writing down the oral law, well, that will need to be abrogated, and that happened around the 200s. In this 3rd century of our common era, so about 1800 years ago, the great rabbi at the time and the other rabbis that were all in consensus decided and recognized that it was time to write it down. Because if we don't write this down, it's going to get lost. So those are alternatives. Either we can follow the rules and say goodbye to Judaism, watch it slowly disappear and fade to black, or we can write it down. Bite the bullet and write it down. So they wrote it down. Take a look. Faye, please read this one as well. Take a look at Maimonides. And by the way, I'm not just giving you a history lesson. We're answering the question. I haven't connected the dots yet, but stay with me. Faye, please read text 3b, Rambam once again.
Why did the holy Rabbi Yehuda transcribe the oral tradition rather than leave things as they always were? Because he observed that the number of students was progressively shrinking while the difficulties were progressively increasing. The wicked Roman kingdom was expanding throughout the world and growing increasingly stronger. Jews were wandering about and relocating to distant locations. He therefore composed the Mishnah, a compilation of Jewish law for all to study, so that it would not be forgotten. He and his court devoted their lives to teaching the Mishnah to the public.
There you go. So what happens is Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Rabbi Yehuda Nasser, Rabbi Judah the Prince, went ahead and they wrote down the Mishnah, and then 100, 200 years later, the next generation of scholars, they wrote down the Talmud. And then the next generation were the Gaonim, they wrote down their works, and the Rishonim like Rashi, Rambam, Ramban, Rashba, Ritva, Rif, Rosh, etc. They wrote down their works. And then the Achronim wrote down their works, the Dakota Jewish Law and others, until today. And all the written Torah essentially is written down. And if you don't believe me, go to safaria.org and you'll see it all right there. And that's where we stand now. And so now we have a disjointed conversation. We started out by talking about Torah scrolls and why we don't write them. And then we segued into this historical anomaly or the historical interesting piece that it used to be that the oral Torah wasn't written and now it is written. Now let me merge these two concepts together, these 2 points together. And they're going to merge in text number 4a. Because here comes the Code of Jewish Law and says, based on the brand new writing of the oral tradition, how do we fulfill the mitzvah of writing a Torah scroll? You with me? What do you write today?
The
2 points
oral
together.
Torah.
The oral Torah. Take a look. Take a look. Take a look. Hold on. Stick with me. Take a look at text 4a. Sandrine, please take it away.
Today it is a mitzvah to transcribe the 5 books of the Torah as well as the Mishnah, the Talmud, and their commentaries.
Okay, so Shulchan Aruch, this is Code of Jewish Law. This is the author of the Code of Jewish Law that we all know and love. He says like this, today means not back in Mosaic times or temple times. This is, this is what, 500 years ago, but nowadays, the mitzvah is not just the written Torah, but to write the Mishnah, to write the Gemara, the Talmud, to write the commentaries. Text 4b, please, one more. Here's the Rush. Look what he writes.
The requirement to write a Torah scroll was binding on the early generation when Torah scrolls were written for the purpose of study. However, today Torah scrolls are placed in the synagogue for congregational chanting. Therefore, the contemporary Jew of me is obligated to transcribe the book of Chumash, Mishnah, Talmud, and their commentaries to study with their children.
Take a look at what he's saying here. Let's pause here for a moment and let's focus on text 4b. Comes along the Rush and says, Rush was one of the early medieval halachas. He says like this, back in the day, as we've been saying tonight, everyone had a mitzvah to write a scroll. Why? Because what are we going to learn at home? What do you learn? You need a scroll. How are you going to teach your kids? You need a Torah scroll at home. This is before the internet. Can you imagine? World before the internet. You had to have a scroll in your house, a Torah scroll. And that's the only thing that was written down. The only thing written down was a Torah scroll. Now, Torah scrolls are used for communal chanting. I love that line, communal chanting. And that's for the reading in the synagogue. What are you going to study at home? Torah plus Mishnah plus Talmud plus commentaries plus Code Jewish law, all that other stuff. So what do you need at home? All those books. Great. So the mitzvah shifts from specifically a Torah scroll to a Chumash, a Mishnah, a Talmud, a Code of Jewish law. Yeah? So to answer the question, why is it that we don't have Torah scrolls in our house? The answer is because Torah scrolls are mainly used for synagogue chanting. What we need at home is other Jewish books, including the oral Torah that was written down. But all of this, is that a satisfactory answer? Not really. Sorry, I mean, no, the answer is no, because, one second. Still left with a few questions here. Number one, if the mitzvah specifically, we learned with the Torah scroll, if the mitzvah is specifically that you should write it, so then how come we're not writing Chumash? Okay, so you're telling me that Torah scroll is for the synagogue. Great. So what do we have at home? We have a Chumash. A Chumash is like a 5 books of Moses book. Great. So are we writing? So did you write that? No. Did you pay for someone to write that for you? No. But off the shelf? Didn't we say not to buy it off the shelf? Oh, man. I should have done the custom Chumash commission option when checking out, and they would print it on demand. Like, that's actually, just thinking now, that's actually a life hack. Print on demand, turns out, is the best way to do it. I'm kidding. But like, how come that's not a thing, number one? And number two, the question really is, on the whole premise, we just read 2 quotes from the Code of Jewish Law and the Rush, and they're both saying that nowadays that you write down the oral Torah, so the mitzvah shifts away from writing a Torah scroll, and it's now more about just having these other books at your disposal in your house to study and teach your kids, and so the family can gather around and study. But who gave the authority to change the mitzvah? The mitzvah is to write a Torah scroll. Now we're saying, nah, don't worry about the Torah scroll. That's for synagogue. That's for a communal chanting, right? What you need at home is these books. Who changed that mitzvah, and how do they change it? In other words, we have some insight, or we're still left with some questions. I want to answer the questions and really come to a magnificent, inspiring call to action, which is perfect for Shavuot. I want to do that by asking one more question. Okay, we're kind of going through this by asking questions. Little Socratic method over here tonight. Here's another question. Has anybody affixed a mezuzah to their home? Has anyone had an opportunity to do that mitzvah? You put a mezuzah on your home. Great. Do you know that you say a blessing, right? There's a blessing that's recited when you, okay. Here's my question. Simple question. When do you recite the blessing for the mezuzah? At what point do you recite it? Who knows?
Before you put it on.
Right before you put it on the door. Right? So if you have like the double-sided tape thing, right before you stick it on, if you have nails, right before you knock it in, right? That all great. Where's the commandment from mezuzah? Where? Oh, 5a. It's from Deuteronomy. Huh? In the Shema. Okay, but one second. We're about to get to Amy. You're gonna read this. Give me 1 second. Let me pull this up. Take a look at 5a. Okay, 5a is from Deuteronomy. This is from the Shema. Take it away.
Inscribe them on the doorposts of your homes and gates.
What's the mitzvah? Inscribe them. In the Hebrew, uchsaftam. Uchsaftam means to write them. Simple question. When should we say the blessing? Before? If the mitzvah is to write the mezuzah and put it on your doorpost, when should you say the mitzvah? When should you say the blessing?
After.
No, while you're doing
it. You always recite a bracha before you do the mitzvah. But if the mitzvah is to write a mezuzah and put it on your doorpost, when should you say the blessing? Before you?
Before you write.
You write it. This is my question. We don't do this, but here's my question. Why don't we say a blessing before we write it? Wouldn't that make more sense? The mitzvah says, you should, the word inscribe, I don't know what that means. Write it, siva. Tiva means writing. You should write it on the doorposts of your homes. and on your gates, write it. Great. So let the scribe say a bracha before he writes it, and then we're done. Why are you saying a blessing before you put it up? You know what the answer is? The answer is because although it says you should write it on the doorposts of your home and on your gates, what it means is the main mitzvah is not the writing. In other words, my question is fake news. The main mitzvah is not the writing. Main mitzvah is to have it on your doorposts. But how do you have a scroll to put on your doorposts? You have to write it. Does that make sense? You can't have a scroll if you didn't write it. So you have to write it and then you put it up. But the main mitzvah is to put it up on your door. That's why in practice we say the bracha before you put it up on your door. So you have the scroll. You buy the scroll from your local scribe, your local sofer, your local Judaica store, whatever it is. You get your scroll, make sure that it's kosher. You get it ready. You pop it into a nice case. You get it in position. You say the blessing. You pop it up. The scribe who wrote it never said a blessing. Why? Because although the Torah says, write the mezuzah for your doorposts, the writing is not a mitzvah. That's a hot take. There's no mitzvah to write a mezuzah. There's a mitzvah to put up a mezuzah. In order to put up a mezuzah, someone had to write it. But there's no mitzvah to write the mezuzah. I know what you're thinking. No one wrote a mezuzah. I couldn't put it up. True. It's called a hechsher mitzvah, not a kosher mitzvah. Hechsher means preparation. In order to do a mitzvah, you have to have a mezuzah to put up. But the mitzvah is to put up the mezuzah, which is why, and it's indicated when we say the bracha. The bracha said not before you write it, but before you put it up. I'll give you one more example. Sukkah. Yeah, you've been in a sukkah before, right? Everyone's been in a hut, Jewish hut. Maybe even you were in a program or you had something, you ordered pizza, and you called the pizza in the hut, just for kicks. Anyway, so before you eat, as you're getting ready to eat in the sukkah, you say a bracha, you say a blessing. You say the blessing on the food, and then you say a second blessing. The second best blessing says, Leishe Basukkah, which is a blessing for the mitzvah of dwelling in a sukkah. Great. How'd you get a sukkah? Had to build it. Was there a blessing that you said before you built it? Do you know what the Torah says? Put up a sukkah and eat in it for 7 days. Mitzvah to build a sukkah? Sure. Where's the bracha? There's no mitzvah to build a sukkah. The mitzvah is to live in a sukkah for 7 days. But you can't live in a sukkah if you don't build one. But the building is not the mitzvah. The mitzvah is to live in there for 7 days. You guys with me on the difference? Sometimes you have a mitzvah, but in order to do the mitzvah, you had to do something else. I'm not discounting that. I'm just saying that's not the mitzvah proper. It's called the hechsher mitzvah. It's the necessary preparation or preparatory step or pre-step in order to do the mitzvah. You have to write a mezuzah to put it up. Build a mitzvah. You have to build a sukkah to live in it, to eat in it. But writing and building are not the mitzvah proper. And it's indicated in where the blessing goes. The blessing is not for the writing, the mezuzah. It's not for the building the sukkah. The blessing is for putting it up in your home. The blessing is for eating in the sukkah. The blessing is when you do the mitzvah. It's not when you do the preparation for the mitzvah. Two different things, two different realities.
Actualizing the potential.
It's even more than that. It's what is the mitzvah? We have to hone in what does God want? Does God want us to sit and write mezuzahs? No. He wants us to have a scroll on the house. To have a scroll on the house, someone had to write a mezuzah. But the mitzvah is not to write a scroll. I'm not saying that's not a thing. It's not a holy thing. It's not a good thing. It's not a necessary thing. It's all good and holy. It's not the mitzvah. And now we need to bring it back. We need to bring it back to scroll all the way back to the Torah. Remember when we said there's a mitzvah to write a Torah scroll? Was there a mitzvah to write a Torah scroll? Was there a mitzvah to write a Torah scroll?
Yes.
You would think. What's the real mitzvah?
To study the Torah.
To have something to study from. To have something to study from. This is where we drop. This is where we drop the big, you got it exactly right. The mitzvah was never to write a Torah scroll. I mean, it was, but it's like the mitzvah is to write a mezuzah. Sort of. It's to put it up in the house. Mitzvah to build a sukkah, to eat in the sukkah. A mitzvah to write a Torah scroll, to have one at home to study from. So when Torah scrolls are read in the synagogue, so you need one there. And when we today study from printed books, not only the printed Torah Chumash, but also the Mishnah and the Talmud, etc., now the mitzvah necessarily adapts to the current situation, because the intent of the mitzvah is not about writing the scroll per se. The intent of the mitzvah is to have what to study at home, to have what to hold in front of you, to study with your kids, to have a text. Let's read this all inside. Let's read this all inside. Amy, you read the last one, right? 5a. Take a look at text 5b. Again, we're in the text. We're going to go back a little bit, but I just want to support everything that I just said over the last 7 minutes. I want to support it with the text. Rambam 5b, please.
Before affixing the mezuzah to the doorpost, recite the following blessing. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us to affix the mezuzah. We do not recite the blessing when the mezuzah is written, because the definition of the mitzvah is the act of affixing.
That was probably clearer than I said it this whole time. Rambam in Jewish law, I don't even know how the blessed, even the bracha that we say, l'kabah mezuzah, to affix a mezuzah, not to write a mezuzah. The blessing is not to write a mezuzah. The blessing is God commanded us to put up a mezuzah, right? You don't write it when it's written, because you don't say the blessing when it's written, because it's not about writing it. It's about fixing it, putting it up on the home. Take a look. Oh, I think I want to skip a few texts over here. Text, yeah, sure.
I might have missed something, but are we saying this because of the blessing and like when it's recited? Is that superseding like the initial writing Torah? Was that in Torah? Like, why does that supersede what was written?
We're using that as a parallel to show that sometimes when you read the mitzvah as described in the Torah, you might think that the mitzvah is this, but it's really this. In other words, when you read the verse in the Shema, and which says, quote, and you shall write it on your doorposts and on your gates. Okay, sounds like the mitzvah is to write a mezuzah. Nope. Mitzvah is to put up a mezuzah. To put up a mezuzah, you need to write it. So that's like it's a precondition that the Torah mentions, but that's not the mitzvah. The mitzvah is to put it up. To put it up, you need a mezuzah, but the mitzvah is to actually put it up. And same thing with sukkah. The mitzvah of sukkah, the blessing about sukkah is not, you don't say the bracha before you build it. You say the bracha before you eat in it. The mitzvah is to live in the sukkah. To live in a sukkah, you need a sukkah, so you need to build it. So that's what the Torah says, build a sukkah, to live in it. But to build a sukkah is like, here's what you need to do for the mitzvah. So the Torah, it depends on how careful we are in reading it to know, like, are we honing in on the step that leads to the mitzvah, or is that the mitzvah or is that the mitzvah? Like, which one is it? So that's why we have the oral law that tells us what the mitzvah is. And so the Rebbe explains, and I think we should skip straight to text 8a. The Rebbe explains that the same thing is true with writing a Torah. You're asking about how do we know about mezuzah to Torah, right? How are we applying that also to the writing of the Torah scroll? Right? I think that was your core question.
Yeah, I guess both. How do we know that it's not writing it?
That's not about writing the mezuzah. Okay, we know that, like we know everything, because that's the tradition that Moshe got from Hashem. That's what he wrote down in the Torah, but we have the oral tradition as to what the mitzvah is. The mitzvah is not the writing per se, but the affixing. The affixing, you need to write it, so the Torah is walking us through the process, but the mitzvah is putting it up. The mitzvah is eating in a sukkah or living in a sukkah for 7 days, as it were. To do that, you need to build it, but that's the mitzvah, that's all the step to get there. And so the Rush says, again, this is one of the early medieval sages. Rush lived, I don't know, almost 1,000 years ago, and or 800 years ago, 900 years ago, he writes the same thing with regards to writing a Torah. Mike, please read this one, text 8a.
This is because the mitzvah to write a Torah is for the purpose of studying from it, as the passage states. Teach it to the children of Israel, place it in their mouths. It is through the Talmud and the commentaries that we gain a thorough understanding of the commandments and the rules. Therefore, these are the books that we are required to transcribe.
What he's saying here is a few things. Number one, that the writing of the Torah scroll is not for the writing. It's not for the sake of writing it. It's not like there's a special bracha that you would say before writing a Torah scroll, like I'm fulfilling the mitzvah of writing a Torah scroll. The purpose of writing the scroll is to teach it to the children of Israel, to place it in their mouths. It's for the study. It's for the purpose of study. So point number one, it's not about the writing. Don't glorify the writing. It's about the utility. It's about having something to study from. And then the second point is that you can't effectively study the 5 books of Moses without the Talmud and the commentaries, which make those other books necessary to fulfill this mitzvah of teaching it. Text 8b. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein similarly writes in his response.
We can't know the oral Torah, the meaning of the written text and its rules from studying the Torah scroll. It is not like the early generations where they fulfilled the mitzvah by transcribing a Torah scroll because the explanations were transmitted orally. Moreover, they are forbidden to transcribe the oral teachings in those days. So
Rabbi Moshe Feinstein says a few things. Number one, back in the day, they fulfilled the mitzvah of, again, there's a mitzvah to write a Torah scroll. We're now modifying that and saying the mitzvah was never to write a Torah scroll for the sake of writing. It was write a Torah scroll for the sake of studying. So back in the day, the only thing they could write, the only thing they were able to write was a scroll of Torah. Therefore, write the Torah scroll, study it. What about the rest of the explanations? They were done orally anyway, which means, let me just paint a picture. Let's say this is our dining room table, right? Let's say this is the table. We're all one family. One family, right? So we're all one family. Okay. And so there's a mitzvah that we should have a scroll at home. Why? So that we can all study Torah together. So God says to Moses, and now tell the children of Israel, they need to write down a Torah scroll so that you can teach it to your kids, teach it to your family, teach it to the next generation, to study it and to observe it. That's what we need. Right? So there's a mitzvah number 613, write a Torah scroll. Write a Torah scroll? Yeah. But write a Torah scroll in order that you have one that you can study. Why only a Torah scroll? That's all they had. What else are you writing? That's all they had. All they had was a written Torah. How are you going to study it without the oral tradition? Oral tradition at that point was oral. That was what we were discussing anyway. The parent would teach a child, read this, and let me tell you what it means. That's how the conversations happen. But from 1800 years ago, from the times of Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, Rabbi Judah the Prince, from the time that the oral Torah was written down, that marked a shift. Now you can't study the 5 books of Moses without having a Mishnah, without having the Talmud, without having a copy of the Code of Jewish Law. Suddenly now at home, what do you need? All the books. You can't just have a Torah. And what would you use a Torah scroll for? You're not reading it publicly. You're using it for the utility. So if you're using it for utilitarian purposes, if you're using it for utilitarian purposes, you don't need a scroll. A scroll is for communal chanting. And back in the day, they didn't have printed books, so they all had scrolls. Everyone had a scroll at home. You see what's going on? We have a few different historical things that are conspiring to shift the way this mitzvah shows up. The way the mitzvah shows up over the generations is it shows up a little bit differently. Originally, it's have a scroll for your house. Everyone had scrolls, and they had to be handwritten. And if they're a handwritten scroll, they have certain rules and regulations. And if you have those rules and regulations, you got to do a kosher. And the best thing is to do it yourself or have a commission and not buy it off the shelf. But once that shifts away from the 5 books of Moses into the other works, and those works are not on a scroll, and you don't even need a Torah scroll because the synagogue has one. You don't need one for your house. All you need is a book. And if you need a book, then you don't have to handwrite it. You don't have to custom commission it because those were rules for a Torah scroll. Those are not rules for books. Give you an example. Give an example. The example might be in here. Let me see for this. The example that I'm going to give you is prayer. We pray 3 times a day. Why do we pray? One of the reasons is because we don't have a temple. Back in the day, they had a temple. And we don't have a temple, so instead of a temple, we pray. Great. Well, who ran the show in the temple? The Kohen. Does that mean we have to have a Kohen leading every service? No. Why not? The answer is because although it's inspired by the temple's offerings, it's not a temple. So you don't need a Kohen to lead services. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
It's inspired by, but it's not the same thing. It evolves. Sacrifices in the temple need a Kohen. Nowadays, it's not sacrifice in a temple, it's prayer. So even though it's the replacement, but it doesn't abide by the same rules, which means back in the day, all they had was a Torah scroll. There was nothing else was written, and they didn't have printed books. So they had to write a Torah. And if you wrote a Torah scroll, make sure it's done right in the kosher way. Otherwise, it's not a kosher scroll. But nowadays, we don't need a scroll. We don't have scrolls. We have books. Books take the place of scrolls. Books don't have the same regulations. You don't have to handwrite your book. It's like prayers versus offerings. You don't have to have a Kohen doing it. You don't have to handwrite your book. You don't have to custom print your book. You don't have to go to Art Scroll and say, hey, you print a custom run of the Talmud for me. You don't have to do that. You can buy it off the shelf. I used to say before off the shelf was no good. Off the shelf is less ideal with a scroll. Like a Kohen should bring an offering. You're not bringing offerings. We're not buying scrolls for the house. It's okay if it's off the shelf. Make sense? So a bunch of things happened tonight. A bunch of things happened. We talked about the mitzvah of writing a Torah scroll, mitzvah number 613, the last of the 613 mitzvah. 613 out of 613 is to write a Torah scroll. Ultimately, we came to the conclusion that the mitzvah is less about writing a scroll and more about having Jewish books for your house, having texts to study from, to teach from, to share with. Why are texts important? It brings people together. It allows a person to understand what they're learning. That's why all these classes, we always have texts. You can see it inside. You're not just listening. I do plenty of talking and listening, but that you should have something grounded. You can see it in the text. It's a good thing to see it. The letters make you wise. There's a classic Jewish saying. The letters wisen you. There's something about having the text. And so back in the day, they had a scroll for the house. One scroll for every house. Today, you don't need a scroll. In fact, if you had a scroll, it wouldn't be enough. It would just be the 5 books of Moses. Go make heads or tails of that. You need an oral tradition. Well, who's got the oral tradition at their fingertips / lips? No one. You have to have more books. Great. So here's the advice. Buy Jewish books. And today, when you and I buy Jewish books, when we build out a nice Jewish library, it's the equivalent of Mitzvah 613, of writing a Torah scroll. That's the big idea. Take a look. We're going to conclude with some text over here. Text 11. Are we up to me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, text 11. Take a look, see at this one. This is powerful, and it's very clear, very direct. In previous generations, this commandment was fulfilled through writing a Torah scroll. When one wrote a Torah scroll, it was like receiving the Torah in its entirety at Mount Sinai for the first time. This experience inspired one to study the Torah and observe its traditions in their entirety. However, this applies to a degree in all places and at all times when we purchase Torah books and study from them. And the Torah books that we're talking about are not just books of the 5 books of Moses, Torah books, but all when I say Jewish books, I don't mean like
Roth.
Who?
Roth.
Oh yeah, what was his name? Philip
Roth.
Philip Roth. Yeah. I don't mean like a Jewish author. I mean like a book, like a sefer, like a Jewish book. Take a look at text number 12. The Rebbe continues and says, "From everything we have learned, we can understand how important it is to encourage every Jew to have Torah books at home, and if possible, not just books, but a home filled with Torah books. That's not just having books; that's having a lot of books. At the very least, every Jew must have." So now you're wondering, okay, what's on my starter list? Here's the starter list. Every Jew must have the basic Torah texts. What are they? Number 1, prayer books, a siddur. I don't know how to pronounce this. Pentateuch, whatever. The 5 books of Moses, including the entire biblical canon. Okay, so Tanakh, I would say 5 books and maybe even the 24. Mishnah, books of Jewish law, etc. That's your starter list, right? I love how it has the etc. Like and more. And we must study them and place them in our mouths. It's not enough to have it on the shelf, but it's important to open them up. When we pull them off the shelf, I'm looking here at a lot of books. I have here that we have the Siddur, prayer book, the Chumash right there. What else do we have? We have the Talmud down there with the Mishnah inside. That's wonderful. What else do we have? We have Shulchan Aruch, Code of Jewish Law. This right here, snapshot. What every Jewish home should have. Because there's a mitzvah. And you know the mitzvah by now. It's number 613. And it says, write for yourself a Torah scroll. But you know what? You don't need a Torah scroll. You know what you need? You need some Jewish books. That's what you need. That's what we all need. I'm not saying you, I'm saying me. That's what we all need. We don't need scrolls at home. We have them for communal chanting in the synagogue. We have them in the synagogue for the communal chanting. You know what we need at home? We need Jewish books. Text 13 is a very poetic text that we're not going to read. So this takes us to the end of tonight's class. And so, my friends, this is it. Tonight, we spoke about the mitzvah to write a Torah scroll. We spoke about this in context of Shavuot, the anniversary of the giving of the Torah at Sinai. And we said that when you write that Torah scroll, when you have a commission, it's like you are once again re-accepting the Torah at Mount Sinai, and it's an awesome experience. And all of that is true, and none of that changes. And that's why even today, although we don't write our own Torah scrolls, we don't keep them at home. We do keep a few in the synagogue on behalf of the community for communal readings and chantings. Nonetheless, there is a good practice that everybody should participate in the writing. You know, if there's a communal effort to write a Torah, or just putting down $1 to look for the, just Google community Sefer Torah, communal Sefer Torah, or Chabad, whatever. There's an organization of Israel that does it. Everyone, you put $1 in, you get a letter, they send you a certificate, where your letter is, what verse it is in, etc. That's your letter in the Torah, and it's like you wrote the Torah, and that's great. But the spirit of that mitzvah, the spirit of the mitzvah is not to have a Torah, a scroll in the synagogue with your name on it. I'm not saying that's not a good thing, but the spirit of the mitzvah is that you could study it at home. How are you going to study at home if you're even if you wrote a Torah scroll and then gave it to the synagogue, or you commissioned? Let's say you spent money and you donated a Torah to the synagogue. Great, that's an incredible mitzvah. We'll dance in the streets for you, with you. But you know what? What do you do at home? What do you do at home? You need to play Wheel of Fortune at home. Wheel of Fortune. Right? How are you going to do that without a scroll? You need the home edition. Comes along the Rebbe and says, 1 second. As the years evolve, as this goes on, we now have clarity. And what we need Jewish books. We need lots of books at home. I have lots. Start with a few. Make sure you have a prayer book. Make sure you have a Chumash. That's the 5 books of Moses. Make sure you have something about Jewish law. It could be a contemporary work. All of these could be English and English only. I mean, Hebrew English Siddur, Hebrew English Chumash, and a book on Jewish law. A book about, I don't know, if it excites you, the laws of Shabbat. A book about kosher. A book about treating each other nicely in business. Whatever your jam. Everyone's got jam. It's like that movie Spaceballs. Raspberry. And they jam the radar. All right. If you know, you know. Anyway, there's only one man who would use raspberry jam to jam. Back to the point. Yeah. Whatever your jam is, have some Jewish books at home. The Rebbe was very much encouraging of building a good Jewish library, and it's a beautiful thing. And then pull them out, study them, learn them study them with yourself, with the kids. It's great. I'll conclude with a story, a joke that they say. They say there was once a shtetl rabbi back in the old country who wakes up in the middle of the night. He doesn't usually wake up. He wakes up in the middle of the night one night. He goes, walks through the house. He can't sleep. And he sees the housekeeper, the Polish housekeeper, wasn't Jewish. She's sitting there at the table, the kitchen table, and she has the Talmud opened up in front of her. She can't read Hebrew, let alone Aramaic, let alone study the Talmud. He says to her, what are you doing with that book? She says, I couldn't fall asleep either. She says, but I see you whenever you open this book and sit down in front of it, you fall asleep. So I figured that was a joke. That was a joke. The point is, we should have the books. We should open them up. Whether or not we get through them at least our kids should see us falling asleep over those books. It's better than falling asleep with their phones and then hitting ourselves in the face with that. Not speaking from personal experience, of course, wing, but that would be a better thing, right? So it's fine to have apps. First of all, Shabbos, got to have books for Shabbos. Second of all, there's something special about having a book, some Jewish books at home. Crack them open, sit down, study, share, Shabbos table, Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, whenever. All right, so my friends, find a Jewish bookstore. There's local Judaica Corner locally, support local business. Go online, support Amazon. I heard Jeff Bezos needs some more money. Go to the publishers, whatever it is, purchase Jewish books, study them, teach them, be inspired, and inspire others. Thank you very much for joining me tonight for Torah study. Happy Shavuot. Richard, we're going to formally conclude, but I will, of course, speak with you in a second. All right, so thank you very much. A quick announcement. I'm going to get to your question in a second. Just a quick announcement about scheduling. So a few very important things. Number one, tomorrow is our final JLI class on medical ethics. That's tomorrow. So day and night, we have 2 classes. Thursday night, I really want to speak about this Thursday night. We are doing the first, to my knowledge, the first Atlanta public screening of Sheryl Sandberg's new film about the horrible atrocities committed against women on October 7th, the atrocities that the world has tried to cover up and say, whatever, maybe it didn't happen. Sheryl Sandberg, former CEO of Facebook, now Meta, helped produce a film, a documentary. She went to Israel. There's nothing, I saw it. I pre-screened it for myself. Nothing graphic is shown. Understandably, lots of graphic details are discussed, but up to a point. It's not about the shock, but it's about the testimony. And it's about putting it out there as a record. This is what happened. These are the people that were there. These are the people that experienced it. She talks to survivors. She talks to hostages who got out. She speaks to Zaka members. These are Jewish ambulance members and others, rescue personnel that went to the scene of the Nova Film Festival and the kibbutzim. So this is firsthand testimony. I saw it, and when somebody sent me the link, I watched it, and my immediate reaction was, we need to show this. We need to have an opportunity for the community to see this in a safe space. In a space we have mental health professionals on hand. We have 2 women from the community, mental health professionals, that will be speaking and kind of leading a conversation after the film and a discussion. So please join. If obviously trigger warnings, if it's not for you, it's not for you. But if it is for you, join us Thursday evening right here, 7:30 p.m. Obviously, it's only in person, 7:30 p.m. For a very special occasion. Now, for this event, I will also mention one final announcement, and then we'll get to the questions. Is next Tuesday night is the holiday of Shavuot, what we're talking about, so a week from tonight. So first of all, we're not going to be having our the Torah studies class, but we will have learning opportunities, and the opportunities really take place throughout the night. The holiday starts a little bit late, so the learning is going to start a little bit late. It's about 11:30 p.m. That's not a.m., that's p.m. We have TED Talks from the community members. About 8 community members will be speaking. Jimmy Barron, former president, but also DJ, right? 99X will be he will be morning show. So he will be emceeing the event. 8 speakers from the community sharing insights, Torah insights, and Jewish and personal stories. That's happening Shavuot night, Tuesday the 11th, right here. Well, not right here, but in this area, in this building, from 11:30 till about 1 or 1:30 a.m. And then the party just continues. There's more learning throughout the evening, throughout the night, into the early morning, because that's what we roll on Shavuot. So that's all happening next week. So we won't see you for Torah studies, but hopefully, if you can make it, we'll see you for the learning. Otherwise, wherever you are, make sure to study, and don't forget to order those Jewish books. They can still arrive on time. All right. Thank you very much for joining me for Torah studies. Great to see you guys, and great to see you guys. Shkoyach. And all right.
I want to put a plug in for you. Order Rabbi Ari's books on Amazon.
Well, there you go.
Wherever they are.
Yes, absolutely. I don't get a commission, but
mommy's your agent.
There you go. Rich, thank you. Richard, jump in.
Yes,
Question.
sir. It's a question that's trying as a long answer, but just to summarize something. When the Mishnah was created by Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, did he write the whole thing down, or was it added on from time to time?
No. The whole thing happened under his. He was the editor.
Okay.
I'm sure they had a lot of people writing it. He organized the project. He oversaw the project, and he was the final editor on the project.
He knew all this in his head.
They all knew this in the head.
So
in their heads.
There's a compilation.
There was nothing written down. Other than the written words that we have, everything was in there, was tradition in their heads. Yeah. The whole thing.
Yeah. So
all the explanations, all the meanings, the fact that tefillin, the fact that a mezuzah contains the Shema is written in black ink on parchment, rolled up in a certain way. None of that is written in the Torah.
No, I understand.
By the way, I've never seen anyone have a different version of tefillin.
But did anyone over the years write notes and then they could oral note?
That I don't know. I don't know.
Okay, so for, you said 100 years later this and 100 years later that. Was that just commentary on?
Yes. The Talmud is commentary on the Mishnah. Correct. Okay. The Talmud always is. It quotes a few lines from the Mishnah, and then it continues with a discussion that happened in the academies about those few lines of the Mishnah. And then it also kind of branches off, and then it gets to the next piece of the Mishnah, and then more discussion. And that's how the Talmud operates. You have a little bit of Mishnah, and then a discussion.
That was over hundreds of years, correct? It was over hundreds of years.
Over about 200 years.
How did telephone not happen to all this?
Because they had it written down. They had the original written down. If you had a note along with telephone, also part of telephone is making it end up different, right? That's part of the fun, is that we started off with pancakes, we ended up with, I don't even know, whatever.
Right.
Something else. Right. Rabbi Ari has a stomach ache. I mean, like, I don't know, like, right, that's how you end up. But the point is to get to a different place. But when the objective is to keep the truth, and you have the core written down, you also have Jews that fact check what you don't think that anybody would be called out over the years. Like, you made that up. Like, if Jews could have a consensus on the Mishnah, wow, that means it's legit. That's straight up legit.
Nothing was written down but prior to Rabbi Yehuda Hanas. Nothing was written down.
You asked that before. I don't know if we have notes. I can't say that there weren't notes.
Okay.
But by and large, I don't know that there were notes.
Okay.
Can I say that there were definitely not notes? I wasn't there. But it wasn't written down. It wasn't written down in a formal way. It was all based on memory.
All right.
For a long, that's a long time. It's like 1,500 years, or maybe 1,000 years. David.
This may be too long of a question, or too long of it. It may start too long of a discussion, and if it does, just tell me. But I was very moved by the teaching tonight about, essentially the mitzvah, or our understanding of the mitzvah, changed over time.
Yeah.
Because of changing circumstances.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to reconcile is, where do you draw the line on when you can change a mitzvah?
Yeah, good point.
It's a great question. That's a great question. I'm so sorry we ran out of time. We got to go now. No. Yeah. So typically, and as you know, we don't change. The question on the table is, sounds like we changed the mitzvah by writing the Torah scroll. So I want to say a few points about that. So number one, you're right. Typically, we don't change the mitzvah. Point one. Second of all, is we still do have a mitzvah to write a Torah scroll, which we fulfill in part by buying a letter in the Torah, helping, be part of the commission of the Torah, etc. So even being in the synagogue when the Torah is read can be part of that. Like, I'm part of that Torah. So there are ways in which we're part of like an actual scroll. But to your point, yeah, I mean, there is a point in time when people just don't use scrolls anymore. And so at that point, yeah, there's a way to technically fulfill the mitzvah. But if the spirit of the mitzvah is to have text to study, well, then 2 points. And these are the consistent 2 points from today's class. Number one, you're going to need more than just one text. 5 books is not going to cut it, because you need, and also number two, you don't need a scroll. You just need a book. right? So those are the 2 points. So did the mitzvah change? Yes and no. No, in the sense that there is still a mitzvah. There's still a scroll mitzvah. As far as the individual mitzvah, the focus is mainly on having a text at home. That was always the focus. So when they just had scrolls, then that was the mitzvah. Now, in a post-scroll world, so now the mitzvah is to make sure you have text. Doesn't have to be a scroll, could be a book. You don't have to write it. You can just buy it off the shelf. And it doesn't, and it necessarily needs to be more than the 5 books. So I know your question is about like, what's the rule of thumb? I think it's about, when the mitzvah just is essentially obsolete, then we find another way to make it work. So, there's certain examples of that. So like, there's no temple, we have no sacrifices. So that becomes obsolete. So then we have now prayer. That's probably the biggest shift. I would say the biggest shift is post-temple. I mean, think about it. Like 2,000 years ago, Jewish life looked very different. I mean, like totally different. Not totally, but very different. It's around the temple. Everyone went to the temple. The Kohen did the thing. The Kohanim did the service. And it's like a very different life. So there was a major pivot then. So is that changing? Yeah, in a certain sense it's changing. But by and large, the things that we can still do like the original, we must do like the original. Things that are obsolete, well, you can't do. So then either we have some sort of replacement or you have a natural evolution of things. So when it comes to most of the core things, they don't change. Mezuzah is still mezuzah. A sukkah is still a sukkah. You have the tefillin is still tefillin. And these Shabbos is Shabbos. So those things change. Those things stay the same. The things that are kind of obsolete. Who has scrolls? I don't know. It's very inefficient to like move from one place to the other. You ever see how long it takes to scroll a Torah scroll? From the beginning to the end? It takes like 5 minutes. You know how easy it is to turn a book to the end? Done. Right. Just flip pages. You're done before you started. Anyway.
Actually,
You got a big workout. Of course.
If you don't have a Torah scroll, can you read Torah from a book?
That's a great question. Let me repeat it. Sandrine's asking if you're in synagogue and you don't have a Torah scroll, like the opposite now, can you replace it with the printed book? No. And you could study from it. You wouldn't be able to say the blessing beforehand or afterwards. You wouldn't have fulfilled the mitzvah of a communal reading. It just wouldn't be that. It would be something else. You would be doing Torah study. And I think maybe that's the best way to address this, the larger question, which I think David is touching on. There might be more than one mitzvah here. There might be one mitzvah to have a scroll. We have a scroll. Great. We contributed to, we have the scroll. Good. We could scroll, check. There might be another mitzvah to have Jewish text at home, which over the years expands to more than the 5 books and now expands to all the other books or some of the other books. And it also expands to not just scrolls, but books. So I don't know. I love the lesson. The Rebbe was very into publishing. When he came over, before he became the official Rebbe of Chabad, when his father was still running things, that was one of the things that he spearheaded, like the Chabad publishing house that I had the opportunity to work for years, Kahad Publishing in Brooklyn. And I don't know, the Rebbe was into publishing. So like, that was one of his 10 mitzvah campaigns, like Tefillin campaign, Mezuzah campaign, Kosher campaign, education campaign, Bayit Maleh Sfarim, a house full of books, Jewish books. Good thing.
I think your term was correct. It's not a change of a mitzvah. It's an expansion of the mitzvah to fit our capabilities.
Yeah. All right, we're going to close out. Folks, good to see you. Laila Tov. Hopefully we'll see you soon. Take care, guys.
Thank you, Rabbi.